This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm here once again with an old friend I haven't seen for quite some time, Mr. Ian Hongell, Chief Winemaker at Torbreck in the Barossa Valley, Australia. How are you today, sir?
Fantastic, Jamie. So good to be chatting to you.
Yes, it is. You've definitely you've made my week. Actually, it's nice to see you again. We are about to talk about this wine here, which is one that's usually for export from Torbreck. This is the 2018 Old Vines, in this order: Grenache, Mourvedre, Shiraz. Tell me a little bit about this wine. I'm greatly enjoying it this evening, it has to be said.
So, as the name suggests, old vines. We have a charter in the Barossa where wines to be called old have to be over 35 years of age. And Torbreck's really been founded on having very old vine sourcing material. So, there's every chance that there's vineyards in excess of 100 years of age in that wine. Right. And the old vines blend is really fashioned on the three traditional grape varieties of our region, which are Grenache, Mataro, and Shiraz. And these have really been planted here since settlement came.
Now, you did say Mataro there.
Yep.
You may have to explain. Yes, for those people who don't know.
And my apologies, I've fallen into my Barossa lingo here. But Mataro is Mourvedre, or in Spain it's Monastrell, and that's just our local name for that variety. But yeah, I will refer to it as Mourvedre. And those three varieties have really been planted here since the establishment of the Barossa in the 1840s, and so we get to pick fruit off vineyards that are extraordinarily old and have wonderful characteristics coming from the sites. The three varieties themselves, Grenache brings beautiful red fruit. It's the lightest of the three, and it has incredible fragrance. And we tend to source these vineyards on some quite tough sites, so lots of stone in the sites, generally some elevation. We're talking around 250 metres to 400 metres above sea level. And the wines have a beautiful perfume and fragrance. And obviously, being old vines, they have great resilience. Barossa is a dry climate and we have very low rainfall. So concentration intensity is something that comes out of these sites. And so an old vineyard with a greater root system has more capacity to weather these years where we don't get rainfall or we may get some heat.
All these old vineyards are dry farm because they're almost like bush vines, right?
Correct. So Grenache very rarely has irrigation on it, and if it is used, it's generally used very sparingly because water here is quite expensive. So the consequence of that is you get low yields, but we also get very high concentration and flavour in the vines coming from it. Mourvedre is a wonderful variety. It's a bit of a weird variety in the sense that you very rarely have it on its own, and it's often blended with either Shiraz or Grenache because it's quite powerful, but it's very awkward and tends to have black fruit, lots of sort of expressive, sort of cedary, leathery, licorice, spicy notes coming out of it, but it has a wonderful colour intensity, and it also has quite a chalky, firm tannin structure. So it's a beautiful building block, and it becomes a little bit of sort of substance and structure for a softer variety like Grenache, and they do pair very well. You have the pure red fruit of Grenache, and then there's the spice, the earth, and the cedar and the leather of Mourvedre. And then finally, we put a little splash of Shiraz in there. Shiraz is a wonderful smoothing capacity where it's added to the wine, and it can really sort of round it out and give substance and weight and texture on the palate and give you that sense that there's density in the wine. Shiraz comes with lots of vibrant red fruits, generally sort of plummy, some cherry, but often then undertones of sort of dark chocolate and milk chocolate. So it's a beautiful complementary variety that actually just adds to the the flavour profile and feel when you then have the Mourvèdre and Grenache together.
I find it fascinating. You mentioned the fact that in this bottle, there are most probably some of your century plus old vines in here. And I think that speaks to the assemblage that you go through as you make the wines from your very top tier down to something like this. So if you wouldn't mind explaining that process for our viewership, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I've made wine for well over 30 years now, and it's really only in the last few years that I've actually seen Grenache vineyards become planted. And so, since the 70s and the 80s, most of those vineyards were sort of well in excess of 70, 80, 90 years of age. And now, and we still think about them as being, I guess, the age that they were when you started, but we've all moved on some 30 and 40 years, and the vines have all got a lot older. So we do take it for granted, if you like, that just the actual sheer age of the vineyards that we work with, and that just is one of the beautiful characteristics of our region. And to me, it's a wonderful asset, and it's part of what makes us so special.
What do you believe the older vines bring to the wines?
So they have a resilience. That's the really important thing to understand, that an old vineyard has resilience. And you see those Sacre Bleu videos where you've had a heat wave come through a part of one of the European wine growing regions, and and everything just simply defoliates, and the fruit basically collapses on the vine. The leaves all wilt and dry up, and the vineyard's essentially looking like someone's put a steam iron over them, and everyone's running around going, my God, what will we do? What will we do? So, not to take away from the severity or the seriousness of that phenomenon taking place, the Barossa vineyards, if you like, are seasoned and trained and have been, if you like, taught to grow in conditions where if we have a heat wave, they just get on with it, and they don't fall apart, and they don't defoliate, and they don't see the fruit all collapse and shrivel up and die. And it's the way the vineyards have been essentially trained since they were put in the ground, and their lack of reliance on needing moisture gives them incredible resilience during these heat waves and unfavourable conditions. So what an old vine does is it has, if you like, a big tank of energy in its actual trunk and the timber that's part of the plant, but then it also has an extraordinarily big root structure. And the wider spacings that we have means that every vine gets a little bit more soil to draw from and to be the reserve to keep the plant going when the times are a bit tougher. So this is what an old vine can bring. So in less favourable seasons, they can still result in growing fruit, getting it to maturity, creating great flavours, and being resilient under these tougher drying and warmer growing conditions. So they're naturally prepared for a changing climate, and time and time again they show their resilience and their capacity to endure a warmer season.
Excellent answer. Do you believe it actually brings any particular complexities or intensity to the wine in the glass itself?
So I think there's we can pull out all the catchphrase words, whether it's umami or third dimension or minerality. A lot of these words are bandied around when we talk about what old vines can bring. And notwithstanding that those elements do become part of these wines, I think the thing that makes the wines stand out above all others in tougher years is their capacity to continue to create great flavour. And you won't see raisins, you won't see cooked fig, you won't see baked Christmas cake characteristics coming out in these wines, because the wines can continue to deliver primary and fresh fruit characters over the growing period in a warming climate.
Now, I was trying to get you to explain a little bit about the declassification system as you're going through your top wines down to a wine like this that's a lot more accessible. Because to be fair, some of your higher echelon wines would be very special occasion wines. Would you mind explaining how that happens and how we would find some of the fruit from some of your most favored vineyards in a bottle like this?
Yeah, so in a wine classification system, you have a hierarchy of preference, and wines are classified on sheer intensity and power, and then also their varietal makeup, and then whether or not you may have an abundant year where you simply can't use all that wine in one particular year. So you'll see components be declassified, and really. With old vines, GMS, here we have components that are coming off quite special vineyards, and they tend to just have more of a softer appeal in that year. So this is why the wines are released a little earlier, and because they have a softer profile in that particular year, we're looking at wines that see no new oak and no small format oak. But we tend to mature them in either Foudre, which are 2,400 litre or 4,500 litre seasoned oak vats, or stainless steel. And we use stainless steel when we want to retain the brightness and the freshness of the wine and really celebrate that purity of the fruit that's coming from it. And that softer profile means that, for a brand like Torbreck, where we're specialising in making quite robust styles of wine, when we get components that are softer, it means we can put a wine together that actually can be released and consumed a lot earlier. And, it's got a drinkability about it that makes it really accessible and quite lovely.
Superb. I loved what you said to me earlier when we were talking about this wine, and you mentioned that you don't often taste this when you're in your domestic market, but when you're overseas, you taste this wine, you're like, bloody hell, I'd forgotten how good that was. So
yeah, and it's a great joy because in this role you make wines, and then we obviously sell wines, and then they go to many of the places of the world, and then you're moving on. You're thinking about your next spring, your next vintage, and you're always working what's directly in front of you, not necessarily what's behind you. So there's a great joy in travel, apart from meeting beautiful people and going to wonderful places. But I often get to see wines that you haven't visited for a long time, and this is one of those wines that when I'm in Europe in particular, and you get to taste it at a dinner, and you sit back and you just go, wow, we did that, and it's quite a joy.
Excellent. Ian, thank you so much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this bottle with my dinner. Great to see you again. Real pleasure.
Thank you, Jamie. You stay well, and love to talk to you, and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds fantastic. Take care for now. Bye for now, Ian.
Bye. Bye.